Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias the Guy. Well, we got some bombshells going down here today, and I got a bunch of information sent to me on email. I've been going through. There's been a lot of more breaking information. A lot of pieces are starting to come together. I'm trying to stay on top of this. I've been working on this for hours, so I'm going to deal with the Trudeau corruption in another video I'll have posted before too late tonight. Right now I'm going to deal with an update on the Pope, just a short update on the Pope, and then we're going to get into the Canadian censorship. Now, the world has been talking about this since a couple years after Trudeau got in, because they already started to see what their aim was with a lot of the tech companies, especially the large corporations like Google, Facebook, etc., and how the government was aiming and using their power to manipulate these corporations, to force them to censor and promote what they deemed as news, real news, not disinformation. Let's just kind of do the Pope, and then we will move on to this explosive new evidence.
There's a somber mood in the Vatican this evening as Pope Francis's doctors report that he suffered a prolonged asthmatic respiratory crisis this morning. It required high flows of oxygen. Pope Francis also received blood transfusion. That after tests showed that he was suffering a low platelet count and anemia. This is the first time that the Vatican has reported that he is in a reserved prognosis, meaning that it is touch and go and requires closer observation. That said, the Pope was sitting up. He was in his armchair by this afternoon, awake and alert, but apparently in more pain than he has been. At the same time, the Vatican hierarchy is trying to tamp down rumors and speculation about his health, whether he might resign given his condition. The Vatican Secretary of State spoke to one of Italy's leading newspapers to say this kind of speculation is really inappropriate. What is needed are prayers for Pope Francis's recovery and return to the Vatican.
So there you go. He is listed in critical condition, but you got to remember he did have, I believe, half of one lung cut out and removed years ago, and this is causing more problems with the infection in his lungs he has now. So thoughts and prayers out to the Pope. Hopefully he recovers, and to all the people out there, think positive. Lord works in mysterious ways. Now we're going to move on. Censorship and how this Canadian government has just exploded across the world, thanks to Joe Rogan, about how bad it really is in Canada and how Canadians aren't even aware. Like, not aware. I'm censored. I'm censored heavily. You know what? I'm going to talk about this. I did piles of studying before I even got this broadcast out. And by the way, the reason I did this is because I had a lot of people telling me, where do you get your news from? And you're right all the time, and you're digging this stuff up. Where are you finding it? So I figured, you know what? I put this channel together to start straightening out the media and just give it to you the way it is. And you know what? I'm Canadian. Sorry, but not sorry. You need to hear the truth. I can run different types of algorithms. There's all different types of availabilities to do so on all of the different platforms, plus with AI and how fast it's getting ahead. I can actually put into AI the information needed for it to think and find how I'm being suppressed. And it always comes back to the Canadian censorship laws. That's their excuse. It's their excuse. That's why I keep saying all the time, please like, share, and subscribe. It's really important. I'm being censored. Pretty much everybody who's trying to get you the real news is being censored. It's bad. Now, I've said before in other shows, I have a VPN, an identifier lockout. I can actually change where I am getting my news so that my computer, the internet, thinks I'm in whichever country I want to be in. So I can actually go out of Canada, out of the censorship, and I can find the truth. I use a series of formulas from different books and seminars I've watched on how to sift through it all and find out which is disinformation, which isn't, and how I always got to go back to the source. And I want to make sure everything that I am looking at, especially repeating to my audience, is true and factual. You can't do that in Canada. It's almost impossible because the censorship is that deep. Now, let's just move on into this crazy censorship regime.
Okay, the motion is adopted.
The resolution passed with no debate on the final day of the Liberal convention.
There is a problem, and it's essential to us, to our democracy, that it must be addressed.
But what Liberal members voted is now raising alarm bells.
It's a dangerous proposal. It's one that we would see, I think, in far more repressive regimes. It isn't appropriate in a country like Canada.
The policy resolution requests the government explore options to hold online information services accountable for the veracity of material published on their platforms and to limit publication only to material whose sources can be traced. The Liberal Party member who wrote the proposal says her goal was to target disinformation posted anonymously online.
I'm not asking journalists to reveal their own, private sources, but the journalist has to be accountable for what their sources give them.
She says she's not concerned about what she calls reputable journalists, but that doesn't comfort critics.
It's not up to the government to decide who's a good journalist and who's a bad journalist and establish new standards or new regulations to those journalists that are seen as not good.
On Parliament Hill, the Conservative Heritage critic called the Liberal resolution disheartening.
I truly believe that as Canadians, we have to hold one another accountable. The moment we invite the state to do that or mandate that the state should do that, we now have state-run media. We now have state censorship. The state will determine what is true and what is not true.
The resolution is non-binding, which means the government has the option.
So, this is ridiculous. Their whole BS campaign that they were running is that no, it's not censorship. It's for reputable. We want reputable journalists. And they have a list that they sent out to Google and Facebook and everybody else on reputable. Well, the reputable, it just so happens that all of the reputable media outlets are all paid by the Trudeau government, or went to school with him, or are part of his group, or went to his wedding, or are part of this huge corruption scandal that I'm going to deal with on a video later tonight. This is insane. This is censorship. This is right out of George Orwell.
Is the Liberal Bill C-10 an attempt to control what Canadians can say, think, feel, or view on the internet? Well, Erin O'Toole says so, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist if you think that. Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist with the Toronto Sun. Erin O'Toole, the Conservative leader, has been leading the charge against C-10 in the House of Commons, asking pointed questions about its infringement of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Is this going to target Granny's cat videos? Is this going to put all kinds of censorship and limits on what Canadians can see, post, view, experience when it comes to the internet in Canada? I agree with Erin O'Toole, so do many experts, but Justin Trudeau says, oh no, this is just a great bill. You just don't understand it.
Allow me to be absolutely clear. This is not about restricting content, but about making Canadian music more discoverable and available to the general public.
How do you do that without censoring other music? How do you possibly do that without censoring other music?
Freedom of speech is explicitly protected under the Act and in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
So Trudeau wants you to think this is about Canadian creators and making Canadian music more discoverable. Look, I support a lot of Canadian music, buy a lot of Canadian music. I've gone to concerts when we were allowed to. But what this could do is actually change your Spotify or Apple Music playlist and make you listen to 3 songs out of every 10 from Canadian artists chosen by the government, just like they do on radio right now. Is that something that you're going to want? Or make sure that you listen to 3 audiobooks from Audible that are Canadian before you listen to more of the books that you actually want to listen to. Is that what we want on the internet? As I've described in my columns, the Trudeau government wants to make the internet in Canada a walled garden, kind of like AOL in the 90s. You can see anything you want as long as the government approves it. Which is why Conservative MP Michael Barrett was right when he was asking about Trudeau trying to remake the internet in Canada in the Liberal Party's own image.
Will the Prime Minister tell us how long it will be before every aspect of Canadian life must conform to his Liberal vision of Canadian society?
The tinfoil hats on the other side of the aisle are really quite spectacular. Our focus throughout this pandemic has been focused on Canadians.
And there you have it.
And the kicker to this is that their media minions were all not reporting or only saying, oh, the Conservatives, like anybody who's opposed to this, come on, it's not censorship, it's not protectionism, they're blowing it out of proportion. They're desensitizing all of their viewers and making it seem like anybody who disagrees with this is like far-right extremist, lunatic, tinfoil hat. You know what? I'm Canadian. I'm sorry to have to tell you, conspiracies are 113 to 0 against the media, and they haven't lost yet. So the whole tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist is a BS ploy. It's a word salad sent out amongst all the media to try and make the everyday person who's watching their program and that's the only program that's got to be real news, think, oh yeah, well, if the media isn't talking about it, then it can't be censorship. It is 100% totalitarian censorship. Now, Joe Rogan. Thank you, Joe Rogan. Here's what he posted on X. I had a conversation recently where we were talking about Canadians having their ability to communicate online limited, where many people said that's not true. And even John Gleese chimed in. Well, this is what I was talking about. Now I'm going to click onto the article. This is the article. Bill C-18, officially called the Online News Act, was introduced by Canada as a way to enhance fairness for news publishers by carving out a way for them to be compensated by big tech giants. It applies to companies that operate social media platforms or search engine websites in Canada, where news is often shared and disseminated, and that have a total global revenue of more than $1 billion in a Canadian year. These platforms also need to have a monthly average of 20 million Canadian visitors or active users. Media outlets that can receive funds include any publisher with an online presence in Canada. The tech companies must reach financial agreements with each individual outlet or one single agreement in which multiple news outlets receive a percentage of promised funds. Under the single deal struck between the government and Google, for example, up to 30% of the funds will go towards broadcasters, with 7% of that going to Canada's public broadcaster, the CBC. A majority of the money will go to print and online media, with the amount determined by how many full-time employees they have. Australia passed a similar legislation in 2021. Meta briefly blocked news there, but stopped after amendments in the law were made. So Australia made amendments. And even now, Facebook's not happy, and nor are the people, because they see they're still being censored. Other countries like the UK and the US have also signaled that they may move to enact similar laws. Well, that party has been booted out. Thank the Lord that the Democrat Party just suffered a major loss, because they were censoring everything. And thank you, Elon Musk, for rescuing the world and like risking your entire fortune to make sure to secure freedom of speech, because the papers they released on how the FBI and the Biden government and regime were using those platforms to purposely censor real doctors, top of their field doctors, regular everyday journalists being censored, deplatformed. In Canada, a company can be fined by the body that regulates media and communication if it doesn't comply with the law. A fine for the first offense can be up to $10 million, and each offense after that carries a penalty of up to $50 million. Now, it goes on, and there's a lot of back and forth involved into it, but pretty much what they're saying is the censorship law, it is what it is. It's not a News Harms Act. It's not an online harms act. It has nothing to do with that. This bill was written to censor free thought and speech and to give money to the brainwashing media so they can push their narrative in order for the government to stay in power and introduce more Orwellian laws. Back to Joe. The Canadian Online News Act prevents people from sharing news links on Facebook and Instagram. The stated purpose is to force tech companies to pay news outlets for their work. But to me, that doesn't even make sense. Posting links on social media drives traffic. The more people post links, the more traffic your news site gets. If people like what they're reading and you're doing the research and they see that it's real, they'll come back and they'll watch. So I don't need the government funding me. I need the people funding me. The more people that fund me shows that the people have trust in me or are entertained by what I am saying. What's stopping people from posting links absolutely does is the limit of ability of people to spread information. Then there's the Online Harms Act, which even The Atlantic describes as Canada's extremist attack on free speech. Now here's The Atlantic. Here's what they wrote. In 1984, George Orwell coined the term thought crime in the story The Minority Report. The science fiction author Philip P. Dick gave us the concept of pre-crime, describing a society where would-be criminals would be arrested before they could act. Now, Canada is combining the concepts in a work of dystopian non-fiction. A bill making its way through Parliament would impose draconian criminal penalties on hate speech and curtail people's liberty in order to stop future crimes that they haven't committed. The Online Harms Act states that any person who advocates for or promotes genocide is liable to imprisonment for life. It defines lesser hate crimes as including online speech that is likely to foment detestation or vilification on the basis of race, religion, gender, or other protected categories. And if someone fears they may become a victim of hate crime, they can go before a judge who may summon the preemptively accused for a short pre-crime trial. If the judge finds reasonable grounds for the fear, the defendant must enter into a recognizance. A recognizance is no mere promise to refrain from committing hate crimes. The judge may put the defendant under house arrest or electronic surveillance and order them to abstain from alcohol and drugs. Refusal to enter the recognizance for 1 year results in 12 months in prison. This is madness. This is madness. And who's the body that says what is a hate crime or what maybe I should or could be thinking before I've actually thought about it? Those are all part of the appointee process in which the government picks. Do you see how deep this runs? This is thick within the appointing process of the Liberal government. Thick. It's now in every institution, including the universities, promoting this censorship, this left-wing Marxist ideology. You know, it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people from colleges and universities, and it seems like in the last 15, 18 years, they will pull out these quotes from Marx and use it in some utopian way, like this is good. And then I've read the books. I'll finish the quote or the paragraph or even align the ideaed principle, And they'll argue with me that I've misinterpreted what I've read. When I ask them if they've actually read the book, they go, well, no, we only have to study certain aspects of it, or the classes, or the teacher was giving speeches, and these are the paragraphs or the statements in which we were given. This is what they do. And I'm telling all of the people, like the younger generation that are in college and university, and actually there's a lot of older people going back to school. When these teachers do this, go read the book. The reason that we don't want to censor books, ban books, is because those books are there to teach us the do's and don'ts in order to remain free and stay a democracy. If you haven't read a lot of these books, you don't understand the concept, and you're very easily susceptible to hear it and take that misinterpretation as then I guess Marx isn't that bad. Marx is a psychopath. He is a complete nutbar. He had a superlative tongue and was very good at writing, but everything he said was democracy killer. It would lead to, and has led to, in those countries that have tried to follow it, mass deaths and genocides. Moving on. In the article, they state a bill making its way through the Canadian Parliament would impose draconian criminal penalties on hate speech and curtail people's liberty in order to stop crimes they haven't yet committed. These are the things I was talking about. It's a slippery slope, and it's moving in the wrong direction for the people of Canada. This is Jordan Peterson. For those of you that don't know who he is, for those of you that do, obviously you more likely follow him. I suggest everybody follow him. This is one of the most, he is the intellectual of our generation, of our time. This man, he is brilliant. He is a sponge for knowledge and understanding the complexities of humans from every aspect in what makes us who we are as an individual, as a people, as a society, as races, as cultures. I'm just going to let him throw a few words in on this.
It's an appropriation of speech. There's no excuse for that. That never has happened once in the history of English common law, right? It's a barrier that we do not cross. Hate speech laws are bad enough. It's not like there's no hate speech. Like anyone with any sense knows that there's hate speech. Who's going to regulate it? Who's going to define it? And I know the answer to that. The last people in the world you would want to. And then we crossed another barrier and we allow the government to compel speech for some hypothetically compassionate reason? No way. That's a really bad idea.
He nailed it. Watch Jordan Peterson. Make sure you follow him. Like I said, he's impressive. Now, Rupa Subramanya she's an amazing journalist. Again, another person to follow. She digs deep into research. She's not afraid to take truth to power, and she is called upon all around the world because of her, we'll call it intellect. She has spent, I don't know how much time studying all different aspects of the journalistic realm, the idea of freedom, of democracy, free speech, and how it can be used for good, how it can be used for bad. Now, I'm posting this one because this is actually gonna be part of what I'm gonna be doing tonight. So this is kind of a joining between two episodes. Listen carefully to what she has to say.
Ms. Subramanya, could you elaborate on what's going on in Canada? I think most of our lifetime, we think of Canada as almost being a cleaner version of the United States. So we can maybe learn some lessons as to what could happen here from what's happened in Canada.
Well, what's happening in Canada right now is that there's a political crisis, and that's the only reason why some of these very pernicious pieces of legislation are just, Parliament is suspended. So they've died as a result, but there's nothing to stop a next government, Liberal government, from bringing them back to life. And what this suggests to me is it's indicative of...
Can you just give us examples of things
C63
that you can't do in Canada today that we would be shocked if it happened here?
Well, I mean, for example, I can give you the example of the truckers' protest in 2022, where peaceful protest was shut down by the Prime Minister, by the government, by invoking the Emergencies Act, and protesters were driven out of the city. They couldn't protest government overreach, and it was government overreach that ultimately got them out. And
so that was the reason for him bringing in the Emergencies Act. There was 0 crimes committed. And I know that there were a lot of people that were really PO'd because of the horn honking. The horn honking was there because the government controls the media narrative. Now, if you've watched my earlier video, I apologize for a lot of the sound in the video. As you can see, with great advice from my viewers, friends and family, I'm getting better. But it shows how they wanted to be heard and they were being suppressed. And it was through media like myself and other outlets like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., where people were seeing what was going on, and then they would click on the news and be going, what? What? That's not what's happening. They honked and honked and honked to try and get Canadians to listen. And like I said, terribly sorry. And all of the protesters there agree, like, sorry, we're sorry. But we were trying to be heard. And our voice was hitting a brick wall at Parliament. And they brought in the Emergencies Act because social media had forced mainstream to start picking it up, even though they were still lying, blatantly lying about everything about it. Lying about how, like, just everything. They accused them of the most uttermost unbelievable stuff, and they were saying it, and there were Canadians that were believing it. But social media was taking the narrative back, and he needed to squash it in order to stay in power. And that's why he brought in the act. There were no crimes being done other than what he was doing to Canadians.
And to make matters worse, many of these people had their bank accounts frozen. This Chinese social credit system had finally come to Canada, was finally in the West. And that's already happened. And since then, there have been a series of attempts to pass through legislation for, as I mentioned in my remarks, if you're praising fossil fuels, for example, a private member's bill suggested that people should go to prison for that.
Can you imagine? This is an NDP motion. This is one of the NDP complete and utter disrespect and disdain for democracy bills that they want to push through. If you work in the oil and gas and you're proud of it, or during a 62 below winter day, you're happy sitting there that your house is warm, your pipes aren't freezing, your family is safe. You can't be proud to say, I love oil and gas. I'm so happy that Canada has the cleanest energy on earth. You can't say that. That's the bill they're trying to push through. Any mention of it, no, fines. These people are insane.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
We have to be on the ball here in future elections.
So anyways, I'm going to end it there, you guys. Thanks to Joe Rogan, I mean, for bringing this up. The world's talking about it. I was cruising through it. There wasn't a single country, once I used my VPN to get out of Canada, there wasn't a single country where this hasn't been in. Every time Trudeau has done a censorship or where it comes up on a weekly basis all around the world. Canada has lost everything that we have worked for since we first became a country, a nation, has been tarnished. And that hope of people when they hear of Canada at being the best place to go is gone. It's evaporated. Now we're a place for extremism. We're a place to come to hate. We're a place that comes and allows you to pretty much do whatever you want if you follow that socialist hardcore agenda. Look at the streets. You may not know it. I'll be showing you lots of, in fact, I'll probably do a video on that, on a lot of this leftist Hamas protests that are across Canada. The Calistini, these people are insane, marching around telling people born and raised here in Canada and new immigrants to go home. This is our country now. This is tolerable. They're beating people up with sticks. They're going into other places of worship, starting fights. We've got schools, Jewish schools, Jewish churches being firebombed and shot at. No charges, no nothing. They're shutting down streets without permits, and yet the convoy who allowed traffic to go through was somehow wrong. But yet, if you're pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine, they like to use the pro-Palestine. They're not pro-Palestine, they're pro-Hamas. Like I said, I lost a couple really good friends that were Palestinians. And let me tell you, they would be the first ones putting their voices out on social media to try and get people to realize that this is not pro-Palestine. These protesters are Hamas. They're Hamas. They're evil. And the cops don't do anything because the federal government has pushed this agenda all the way down the food chain. And like I said, the corruption is exposed within the RCMP as well through what's going on with the charges being laid against Trudeau for obstruction of justice. We have documents and information proving that the police sat on information, hid information. They were completely biased in protecting the Liberal regime. Canada is in a sad state of affair, people. I hope that you like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification button. Get the word out. Let us try to help people open their minds and see the reality of what Canada is today. Until next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm Alias Tagai. Have a great evening.